Whether you're working on the degree or you've just graduated, you're probably wondering what's next.
Well, don't worry. We were wondering exactly the same thing.
From auditions to young artist training programs and beyond, we've been there and we got your back.
This is Between the Notes, real talk for singers chasing the dream.
Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of Between the Notes. Today, we are so excited to have with us Dana Lynn Varga, who is a professional classical soprano, a voice teacher, a career coach for musicians, an entrepreneur, and the founder of The Empowered Musician. Thank you so much for being here with us, Dana.
My pleasure. Glad to be with you.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about how you got started in music. And I know we met when I was singing at Boston Lyric Opera.
Yeah.
I think you were, that was back, I don't know, over 10 years ago.
A while ago, yeah.
Yeah. So
no need to worry about that. It was a good time, and it happened.
That's right. So yeah, how did you get into this whole thing?
So my father was a professional jazz bassist. I grew up with a jazz bassist dad and a linguist mom who speaks 5 languages. So the joke is you put them together, you get an opera singer. I was originally a cellist and then became very interested in singing around my teenage years. Started out with a musical theater teacher who tried to get me to belt, and I was like, this isn't what I want. And then I ended up getting sent to the local opera teacher and was like, yes, this is the thing. I found it. So I was sort of a dual major, psychology and music education, and then eventually found my way to a performance degree, despite being very afraid of that path and, what that meant, because I've always been a very pragmatic person, and I grew up with a musician father. So pursuing performance just felt like a scary move, but I knew that I had enough additional interests and skills that I would never starve. I did my undergrad at UMass Amherst, my master's at New England Conservatory. Then I did the young artist program scene and taught privately for a long while, I think 4 years in there before I began my doctorate, which I completed at Boston University.
Great.
Okay, so you did your master's in vocal performance at NEC?
I did, yes.
Okay, and then after finishing that, you started doing auditions for the whole young artist
I was
stuff.
out doing the whole thing, constantly back and forth from Boston to New York and away for the summers and running my own business in a private studio, freelancing, oratorio, church job, that whole thing. And then I was very fortunate to have a full ride for my doctorate. I worked full time during the DMA so that I didn't accrue more debt, because debt prevention and management is really important to me. Yeah. Always has been. I work with people on that subject a lot these days. And and then I was also fortunate to be placed immediately into a 2-year full-time interim faculty position, right from my doctorate. And that was perfect because it was just enough time for me to see that that's not what I wanted to do.
There you go. Yeah.
I think it's so important for people to experience the things that show them. Sometimes for some of us, it takes us 2 or 3 experiences to realize, no, that's really not what I want to do.
Totally. Absolutely.
But, the thing that I have become so aware, and so many have become aware of your talks at things like Opera America and I brought you in to talk with us when I was teaching at different universities. But your sort of, your talk about the necessity of figuring out how to make a living and stay above board without, like you say, going into debt when you're trying to pursue this thing. And it brings me to the question of what is and I know you've sort of trademarked this pipeline idea. What is the pipeline? What is the path that so many singers are told, well, first you got to do this, then you got to do this. I mean, like you just said, you got your bachelor's, then your master's, you started doing auditions for young artist programs. I think that's the majority of what, I remember I graduated from my undergrad in the late 90s, and then, 99 to 02 was my graduate school, and then 02 to 04 was post grad. So in that era, I think we were kind of all told the same general information of right. Here's what you need to do, but I'm sure you can summarize it better than me.
For sure. I use the term the pipeline, not necessarily in a negative way, but to label, to title what I call the prescribed path for classical singers. And as you can see from my own path, I was a real rule follower and did what I was told to do. And it actually worked for me. It just turned out it wasn't really what I wanted. But the pipeline for me refers to going into undergraduate studies in vocal performance, and then straight into the master's. God, go straight to the master's for vocal performance. And that sort of back-to-backness speaks to the things we have around age in opera and running out of time, this idea.
Right.
And then, perhaps during, if not immediately following that education, we're auditioning for yaps, we're doing competitions, we're networking as best we can. And then, one yap begets another yap. We sort of have these various internships with opera companies. And then either through that scene or through our connections or through competitions, we secure a manager. And then we have our quote unquote operatic career or full-time operatic career, which is sort of the pipeline dream, which of course all of us know is not a reliable path for the majority of people. And it really can set up folks for expectations that are unreasonable. And it's also changed a lot since our era. You and I are about, 4 or 5 years off from each other. But essentially, if you look back, the pipeline has always been an incredibly complex and competitive way to go about a career, but it's only gotten worse and worse and worse over time. So I think in our day, it was more effective for a larger number of people than it is today. And some of the factors that go into that are the financial crash of 2008, as well as the creation of Yap Tracker, which was just a little bit before that time.
Yeah, I remember my sister, of all people, is actually friends with the woman who created Yap Tracker.
Cool.
And, yeah. And, of course, we've all heard from various arts administrative people who have talked about the influx of applications that have come across their desks since the invention of Yap Tracker comparatively to before. But yeah, I think it's certainly, back in our day, it was Classical Singer magazine.
Sure. Yeah.
Or some word of mouth or something, but you compare that to like our teachers when it was like finish your undergrad and then go to Germany and try to find a fest job, it was like a total different sort of pipeline, I guess, as it were.
Which is a different sort of pipeline, right? And often a sort of separate set of advice, which again has its own pipeline affiliation to it, but and again, the pipeline can be very effective. Some people end up on that path one way or the other, but it's often nonlinear. And I think that's important to keep in mind, is that we get this idea that we just follow these steps and then this magical thing happens. And it often isn't true, especially for women, especially for sopranos.
Yeah. And I think that segues really nicely into, okay, well, if you find yourself in that position, what do you do with the time that you do have on your hands? And how can you, as you said, both my parents are accountants. So like paying bills and responsibilities as an adult is, a reality. And I think it actually, if one can find a correlating career, not to steal your term because I love that, but just, something to do to help you pay the bills along the time, then it gives you more financial freedom to actually take some time off, to buy a plane ticket, to spend an extra night in a hotel and not feel like you have to get up, drive to the airport, fly in that morning, do the audition and get back on a plane,
Absolutely. And to add to what you just said, I also find that people who are financially secure and have reliable sources of income, they stay in the game longer.
Totally.
And the longer you stay in the game, the more likely it is that you'll eventually find yourself with more work. At least that was true for me. I made my Carnegie Hall debut in my late 30s. Won a bunch of competitions later in my life while having babies. So financial security allows you to stay in the game if the pipeline doesn't just spit you out at 29 with a magical career,
Sure.
So the term correlating career, I like to use, people use all kinds of words: parallel career, mosaic career, portfolio career. They're all great.
Right.
But I like the term because it runs alongside your singing career.
Yeah.
And I really actively discourage the use of terms such as plan B, fallback, backup plan, even the word day job sometimes can be problematic, especially if it makes you view it as something less than or something
Yeah, I was
Oh,
just going to
that,
say, it's
you
like
know?
it makes it seem like, well, but this is what's your real job? And
Yeah,
that's the thing where it's like, no,
right. I don't
no.
love that. I think that if we're going to spend a lot of our time doing something, then we want ideally what I call the holy trinity, which is that it's fulfilling, it's lucrative, right? So we
mm-hmm.
want fulfilling, we want lucrative, and we want it to be something that matches our skill set and interests.
Yeah, and
So,
just so while we're talking about these, I pulled a screenshot from your presentation that you
oh,
created, and so just so we can kind of have a look at this,
sure.
some examples of correlating career opportunities or options. So we've got voice teacher, arts administrator, life coach or therapist, a career nanny, piano technician, a realtor, executive assistant, personal trainer, physical therapist. I mean, these are great because to use your words, it's like you kind of set your own schedule with a lot of these. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're choosing, it's always tricky too, because when someone considers this concept, it depends on when this idea comes into their life. If they're considering this idea from high school, that's going to set them up in a different way than if they're first hearing about this and thinking about it in undergrad versus grad school versus a lot of my demographic, people who come into my career coaching room are post grad school in what I call the panic phase, right?
Mm.
Sure.
And ideally, we've thought through this a little bit before that, but of course, there are plenty of options to pivot at any time. People change careers all the time, add careers all the time. But yeah, in the screenshot that you provided, those are some of the examples of correlating careers I have seen be very effective for people.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I also know a lot of people who have 9 to 5s and make it work. It really depends on, are you remote? Are you hybrid? How
Right.
flexible is it?
Sure.
The flexibility being so key. But a lot of things that are done on a session basis or in a situation where you can create your own schedule or take off and leave for a little while and come back and not lose your whole clientele, those types of things are ideal.
Right.
But there's always going to be trade-offs, right? You can't have you can't have your cake and eat it too. There's times where you're going to get this amazing gig opportunity and maybe you have to lose a job over it and then come back to a different job. There are definitely many different fallbacks to different types of correlating careers. So it's
Mm-hmm.
always a game of like pros and cons.
Yeah, I think
And
you made such
yeah.
sorry, Weston. I think you made such a good point in like making sure that your voice and your voice usage in your correlating career is not going to then undercut. I mean, if you're working in a loud restaurant or somewhere where you just are talking all day or teaching, these things can like, well, if you're going to show up to the audition tired, you maybe probably shouldn't do the
Yeah,
audition,
I
right?
think voice use is really important and something that isn't considered as paramount often because again, people get into panic mode
Yeah,
and then they're like, must make money, right? So
right.
taking the voice into consideration is really important. For example, I have not seen very many people have success balancing a career in singing with a K through 12 music job. I mean, think
Right.
about the voice use, not to
Sure.
mention the rigidity in schedule. I mean, sure, you get the summers off, but you can't just take off, right?
Yeah.
So that
Yeah. The
doesn't
thing I
tend
was
to be
gonna
a good correlating career. And
yeah. Okay, so go ahead. Sorry, I didn't
oh,
mean to cut you off.
you're fine. I was, I've been a voice teacher for a long time, and that I was lucky that I found that was my ideal correlating career early on.
Mm-hmm.
But I've always had to set a very firm limit of 3 to 4 hours a day. That's
Yeah.
always been my limit because if I wanted to keep up with my practice and my stamina, etc., then that was what worked for me. Everybody's a little bit different.
Sure.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably deciding on what the best correlating career for you would be. I mean, a lot of it goes into personality, a lot of it goes into strengths, but like you have to decide what your end game is, right? Like what is it that you want to be? And I think a lot of the different conversations that I've had with students, let's say between the ages of like, I don't know, 18 and 30,
Mm-hmm.
are like, well, okay, you want to be a professional musician. That's why you're majoring in vocal performance and you want to sing. But have you thought about how you want to sing, right? Like, do you want to be a professional chorister with an opera chorus? Do you want to be a professional chorister in like a professional chorale, like the Seraphic Fire or Kansas City Chorale or
Mm-hmm.
Conspirare or something like that? Or do
Yeah,
you want to
which is
be
a whole separate and important conversation for sure.
right,
Yeah.
right? Because the demands are totally different. The skill sets are totally different, not only within the structure of how to sing, but then the demands and travel and so forth of what you might be expected to do.
Knowing that repertoire, I mean,
Yeah.
there's a lot of A lot of
Yeah, I
things
meet
there.
people all the time who just had no idea that being a professional chorister was a thing,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
outside of
mean,
opera.
totally. That was one thing that was great about being at Westminster is that we were actively promoting, you can make your living as a singer in a number of different ways, and it can be your full-time gig, it can be your part-time gig, it can be
Right.
something you do just for pleasure and for fulfillment and enjoyment of music. And there's no shame in any of that.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
Well, that's great.
absolutely, you know, here for enjoyment and the betterment of the world that we live in.
Well, and you
Yeah.
start to make friends with people who are like full-time choristers at the Met or San Francisco or
Yeah,
Chicago, and you're like, you guys make how much money? It's like
sure.
it's crazy amounts of money that these
Yeah.
that you
Yeah.
can make, and oftentimes far more money than you would make as a soloist.
Right.
I mean, if we're talking about the
Yeah.
0.00001% of the people who are regularly going as a soloist from the Met to Lyric Opera of Chicago to Dresden to Scala,
Right.
around the world, those people are making quite a bit of money for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that that might be that dream that everybody starts out with. But I think it's so important to like not brush under the rug the
Mm.
other opportunities that you have as
Absolutely, because the pressure that comes with that kind of career. I mean, Wes and I talked about this on another episode. It's like you're not going to even know if it's what you want. And Dana, you alluded to this. You're not even going to know it's what you want until you're actually trying it out.
Yeah, for
Because
me, it was the travel.
yeah,
The constantly being away from home and the constant worry about the voice.
yeah, same.
And then even just like sitting down from a numbers perspective and running numbers of like what I would make at home with my beloved students in X number of hours versus whatever the
Right,
gig was I was doing versus
right,
the stress and the reflux concerns and the sleeping in a strange
sure.
space. And I just, I burnt out on the travel pretty quickly, even though I was like heading on a bit of a pipeline jaunt, but
Yeah,
ultimately not quite a fit for me. And
yeah,
then I was introduced to oratorio through my church job and really fell in love with that genre.
yeah.
And I live in Boston, fortunately, where we do so very much oratorio. And I was able to make quite a good living prioritizing that and then doing opera when I could.
That's great. Yeah,
yeah. And I mean, just for our listeners who knows, maybe they're just starting out in undergrad or in a master's, but I mean, listing some of the opportunities. I mean, we mentioned a few things, right? Like in the opera world, the Metropolitan Opera, the Lyric Opera of Chicago, and San Francisco Opera have full-time choruses. But
hmm
all of the other opera companies that are whatever town you're from or going to school in, they have some type of part-time chorus that you can be involved with, which may or may not be AGMA, the American Guild of Musical Artists, which tend to set their rates at a specific number. But in some way, form, or another, if you wanted to be in an opera chorus, you can certainly make money doing that. And we listed a couple of the different professional choruses that are around the country: Seraphic Fire, Kansas City Chorale, Conspirare. I know there's The Crossing, which is in Philadelphia,
right. Yeah,
the Santa Fe Desert Chorale.
Oh, yeah, I've got a big long list of those for sure.
Yeah. And to understand how those things are structured, of course, I think Brian, Dana, you just mentioned being a church musician, right? I mean,
yeah,
there's a variety of different ways that you can get employed at the church, whether you're a soloist or, I mean, present company here included. Brian is an organist at a church, so I mean,
right,
or
right.
that's how
Yeah.
you got started, and then you've
Yeah.
done that up throughout the
Yeah,
years.
I mean, it's great because, when everybody in college who was voice majors were getting up and have to be section leaders and stuff like that, I could sit there and just be quiet and just sit at the piano. I mean, that's thankfully something I was interested in, and my parents were able to, swing the money for the lessons, and it's something that I did. But yeah, I mean, there are so many ways to think about knitting together a livelihood. And also for me, it was really fun to wear different hats because if I focused on one thing, I would tend to like go hyper focus and then burn out a little bit and then be like, I'm gonna do something else. And so I've found that it's just better for me to bounce between things. And that's one of the things I enjoyed being a singer is you get to be
Yeah.
dealing with the social media and dealing with this and dealing with being a travel agent, like things that kind of, can be a little bit, they can get out of control. But also I just welcome the break from just sitting there and translating and memorizing
I
so
think it's really
much.
just, it's such an individual thing. People are
Yeah.
so different. I know people who, they sing and they manage their singing career. And then when it comes to work, they want to know exactly where they need to be from X hour to X hour. And they
Yeah.
don't want to ever have to think about, a really structured correlating career for someone like that. me, I'm an entrepreneur and I have a zillion interests. And over the years, I've had to let go of interests. Like I really
Yeah.
love conducting, but eventually, and I was conducting as part of my portfolio as a church musician, but had to let that go as other interests came up. And I like to look at a singing career, whatever portion of your income comes from singing. If you take that portion and kind of imagine it as a Venn diagram, most people don't do one type of singing. Some do, but it's pretty rare. You're usually going to see some sort of intersecting circles. It's interesting in Boston, there's a big church music scene, which I actually haven't been a part of for a long time. And a lot of times people who do a lot of professional choral and church singing are the people who are also the oratorio soloists. And then I come with my Venn diagram being more like opera and oratorio as a soloist, but not really necessarily breaking in via the choral scene at all. I've not really done a lot of professional choral singing at all. So, and then, some people, part of their Venn diagram is doing musical theater, which I love to see more opera singers embracing that, because I don't buy into the whole you have to choose thing.
Sure.
I think you have to be good at taking off one hat and putting on another. And then look at someone like Laura Dixon Strickling, who specializes in art song, particularly new art song. I mean, what a niche, right?
Right.
Grammy nominated. How about that as a
Yeah.
clear example, right? People
Totally.
who really love to dig in on new music, or really like to specialize in Baroque, or really like to take the time to pitch themselves for concerts and recitals and events, because if you're good at self-management, you can find all kinds of work in all kinds of interesting ways. So
Sure.
It just depends on the person, and you've really got to think outside the box.
I
Well,
love
this
it. It
kind of
makes
segues nicely into the
Yeah.
forge don't follow idea,
Right,
It's like
right.
don't try to be like the teacher that you had, or anybody else for that matter, but do what you're passionate about and follow, your artistic needs and desires, and make it work.
For sure. I
Yeah.
mean, again, ideally, when you take a gig, when you're considering a gig, when you're pursuing different types of work, you want it to match your skill set, be fulfilling, and not pay nothing, right? The more lucrative, the better. But it's hard sometimes to see people feel forced into things that they're not necessarily a right fit for. For example, if you did want to pursue the types of choral groups you were mentioning earlier, like the Seraphic Fires of the world, your sight reading needs to be absolutely paramount, right? You need to be able to sing anything anybody puts in front of you, and your ability to blend and work as a team. And not everybody has those skill sets.
Yeah.
So just like with a correlating career, I think both aspects of your life, you've got to look at what is fulfilling, what matches your skill set, and how are you going to, ideally not just survive financially, but thrive financially. And
Yeah.
I go next level with people a lot to look even deeper into not only what do you need to live, but how are you thinking about your future, and how are you building your financial literacy?
For someone who works so much with singers, like you said, in these panic modes, do you see any kind of trends that happen where it's like super frustrating to you? I can just imagine of like if you hear one more time that a singer has da 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 da, it's like what is the thing that so many singers seem to miss the point on?
Yeah, I would say the most frustrating things overall is sometimes getting a sense of the overall debt. I won't share with you the numbers, but some of them are truly horrifying as far as how far gone the debt is. And then upon deeper investigation, finding out that perhaps people had no idea that you even could appeal scholarships, or how scholarship appeals work, for example. That frustrates me quite a bit. People accepting offers because they think a certain school is going to build a certain network and a certain amount of connections, and then spending 3 times as much, when sometimes that's the right choice and sometimes it isn't. But, there's that. And then I would say the thing that makes me bang my head against the wall in private the most is what I call hashtag opera or die. And what that means is I meet a lot of people who are like, it's got to be opera. I'm just not going to be happy doing anything else. And I don't want to be a chorister.
Yeah.
I only want to be a soloist, and I only want to do opera, Dana. And I'm like, I don't want anybody to give up on their dreams. I really don't. And I also don't want them to starve and then end up so frustrated that they completely walk away from music. That's not what you want to see. So it's very difficult to get people, especially of certain generations, to let go of the like, you can do anything you put your mind to.
Oh my gosh, I can't agree more.
You know,
It's
it's
like,
really hard.
and if you don't get it, it's because you're not working hard enough. That sells. I mean, I know,
Right.
yeah, that's just not true.
Well, I like to use my example where in 2006, I got a very kind PFO from Glimmerglass Yap that
Hmm.
said, "You're on the wait list. Congratulations. We had 400 applicants this year." I still have the letter. And I reviewed their numbers. I spoke to the office this year, and their numbers this year was 1,100 applicants.
Wow.
Okay. So this is 18 years later, we're talking, and these numbers have essentially tripled, sometimes in some cases quadrupled. And you could present the absolutely most, flawless pre-screen. And in a lot of cases, it's not that you're not working hard enough. It's
Right.
just numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to break down some of those frustrating moments, like when you mentioned debt, I so often hear people sort of throw off, well, that's just student loan debt. That's no, that's just school debt. I'm focused on trying to fix my credit card debt or whatever it is that they're doing, right? I've got
Oh
my car
man.
loan. It's
Right.
like, but to your point, like
Monopoly
I
money.
remember getting that FAFSA sheet and realizing that, oh, what's the max? I can take out $48,000 or whatever it was in
Right.
19,
Sure.
back in the 1900s, as my daughter says. But like, it's
It's
kind of astonishing what they will release to an 18 or a 19 or whatever year old. And it's like there's no way that they could possibly understand what that's going to look like in the next 25 years. And so, yeah,
Well, and just the concept of compound interest, period.
right.
It to anyone who's financially literate, compound interest is very straightforward. If you have a mortgage, you understand it. And if you've really learned about student loan debt, you understand it. But most people I talk to do not truly understand compound interest and making minimum payments, taking deferments. I mean, these are things that will absolutely bite you. And you're not wrong. I mean, a lot of people view loans as monopoly money
Right.
until eventually it catches up with you and you want to buy that house or you want to have more financial freedom and you're simply just tied down. And then in a lot of cases at the same time, you're banging your head against the wall with your singing career and meeting all
Right.
this frustration. It's a nasty cycle. And I do everything I can to prevent that cycle on the front end.
Sure.
So what are some of the things that you can provide to? I don't want to end on a sour like, nah, nah, nah. But like, what are some of the things that students can think about doing it and that are positive, that are going to get them moving in the right direction, so that when they do graduate or when they do, whatever stage, stage of the life that they're in, what are some of the things that you encourage people to focus on?
Yeah, number one is when it comes to your additional income streams, sometimes it's one stream, sometimes it's many streams. What are those other interests that you either put aside to focus on music or that are there that you think you could make a correlating career out of? Find the things that light you up, that are exciting to you. I originally was interested in psychology and I continue to be interested in psychology, which is how I've ended up in life and career coaching. And so I think really embracing your other interests and not letting them fall completely to the wayside and seeing if there's, something to be made of that. I think also really communicating regularly and having exposure to multifaceted artists is super, super important. And a lot of it's a part of the vicious cycle is that a lot of students in the academic system are exposed to famous people for master classes and visits.
Yeah.
And it's exciting to meet famous people. But unfortunately, when you're only coming face to face with the 1%, you're not getting an accurate picture of what the field looks like. And so it's really important for, the academic system and for the students within it to interface with multifaceted artists who have correlating careers and mosaic careers and do various types of performing, lecturing, teaching, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that it's destigmatized, right? That it's a completely normal, expected run. Like this is how it works, right? And
Yeah.
if you happen to end up in the 1% and enjoy that and want that lifestyle, great, fantastic, wonderful. But we're setting ourselves up for the expectation that we're going to have this rich, fulfilling life that has a few different moving pieces, but that assuming you're coming in with a positive mindset around that and also having your reality goggles on, there's a lot of really cool stuff that you can get up to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think reality goggles should be handed out your freshman year.
I prefer to have the reality goggles handed out in high school. I had the good fortune of working at the Boston University Tanglewood Institute for 7 years, the high school program. And one of my students was Emily D'Angelo, actually. And, so we have students out in the world that are 1%ers, and we have students out in the world who don't sing at all anymore, and a lot of them in between. But we had the opportunity to really impress upon them these concepts at such a crucial age before they even started undergrad. But yeah, I think the younger, the better. And the more that we destigmatize correlating careers and being a multifaceted artist, the better. At this point in 2025, I think it's important that singers understand that if you're going to spend money on a voice teacher after school, or a coach, or a dramatic coach, or a diction coach, that a career coach should absolutely be a part of your team if you are really wanting to figure this all out. It's considered kind of this, what is that? What is a career coach? I've never really thought about that before. But I think these days, why wouldn't you incorporate a career coach as part of your team to ensure that you're heading in the direction you want to head?
Well, to answer that question, can you talk just a brief moment about how, as you said, you're a career coach yourself. So what is it that you focus primarily on in those sessions?
I mean, I meet with families who are auditioning for and applying for college for the first time, all the way through people who have wound down their singing careers and are for the first time considering opening a voice studio. It runs the gamut. So I meet people where they are, and I gather the information that's relevant to what they want to work on. And then I don't do a lot of touchy-feely. That's not my job. My job is to figure out where are the obstacles, what are action items we can employ right away, what's getting in your way. Is it executive function? Is it financial debt? Is it both? Is it imposter syndrome? It can be, of course, all of these things, but
sure,
we really get at it and get after it as far as what's holding you back, what is the plan, what steps are you going to take, how are we going to keep you accountable to take those steps? And in a lot of cases, they just don't know what steps to take. So we really go through and outline in detail what they can do. For example, if somebody says, well, I would love to get into the oratorio scene in my city, but I have no idea how to do that. There's never auditions for those types of jobs. And I'm like, oh, great. I'm gonna crack my knuckles. I'm like, all right, let's talk about it. Let's figure out how you can get those oratorio gigs in your city.
Yeah. I love that it's so practical. I mean, it is not, but the way that you're presenting it and the way that your thought process is that it's not this big mysterious thing. Weston gives me a hard time all the time. I talk about singing is mysterious, but it's this idea that there are people out there like yourself who have kind of figured this out, and not kind of, but definitely figured it out, and can help people. I mean, the whole process, the reason we're doing this podcast is because who knew an opera singer when they decided they wanted to be an opera singer? Not me.
Or who even knew what being an opera singer looked like?
Yeah, I just thought you were going to, graduate and become the three tenors. You know what I mean? No, it's not how it works. Yeah. So, well, thank you so much. I really appreciate everything you've shared with us. This is great. We're going to get everything in the description, how to get in touch with Dana. And set up a time if you want. And thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here, Dana.
Yeah, great to see you guys.
Thanks for joining us on Between the Notes. Make sure you hit that subscribe button.
And join us next week for more behind the scenes stories, laughs, and operatic gold coming your way.